Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadati Swapadantikam. That's a nice verse to recite before reading the Nectar Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is how Srila Rupa Goswami, we're known as Rupanugas. We're following in the footsteps of Rupa Goswami, particularly in our line, because he's Rupa Goswami, although he has his pastimes in Vrindavan, and we all know from the Chaitanya Charitamrita how he met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his lifetime here, has a spiritual form. And in the spiritual world, he has a very particular service. And we're actually following in his footsteps, because the way in which one comes to the highest level of perfection in devotional service is by following the eternal associates in the spiritual world. This is the teaching of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And in our line, we're particularly followers of Rupa Goswami. So we're known as Rupanugas. So in this verse, the Sri Rupa Pranam, obeisances to Rupa Goswami, say, Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadati Swapadantikam. He's established in this world the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When he knows, Manobhishtam means he knows the inner desire, the mind of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we see from the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu how when Rupa Goswami was in Jagannath Puri, and he wrote some poetry in which he exhibited how he understood the internal goings-on of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who during the Rath Yatra was singing a particular song. And it was actually a secular song of the time. It's kind of interesting if you see somebody at a spiritual event, Rath Yatra or something, and they're singing a secular song. Some people might think, what, are they crazy? Or why are they singing that? But Rupa Goswami could understand exactly what his mood was. And therefore he wrote a parallel verse which was particularly connected to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mood at the Rath Yatra, which is an event that replicates the meeting of the residents of Vrindavan with Krishna when he's in Dwarka. And in their separation, they want to bring him back to the environment of Vraj, which is the place where the highest kind of devotion to Krishna takes place. And the songs that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sings during the Rath Yatra are particularly indicative of that highest level of devotional service. And therefore, Rupa Goswami, being his intimate associate in the spiritual world, could understand what his feelings were, and therefore wrote a beautiful verse. He wrote many beautiful verses. He wrote thousands of them, in fact. So many books the Goswamis wrote. Some of them were so esoteric that it said there was a vault in which many of them were kept, and no one's actually found that vault, because many of them were so deeply intimate in describing the relationships between Krishna and his devotees that they couldn't even be exposed to the world. So there's always unlimited information about the spiritual world. But Rupa Goswami, particularly Manobhishtam, could understand the mind and heart of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And who is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? He is Krishna, but he's in the mood of Srimati Radharani. Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nahi Anya. It's revealed in the Chaitanya Charitamrita how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Radha and Krishna combined together. Krishna comes in the Kali Yuga, but he has a golden form, not a blackish form, and his mood is that of the mood of compassion of Srimati Radharani. There's of course, extensive explanation of how and why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes, but the short answer is that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. And the highest enjoyment, of course, in this world is love, the relationship of love. And the devotees in Vrindavan, particularly Srimati Radharani, love Krishna so much. But Krishna is the object of love. Therefore, Radharani is tasting something superior to what Krishna is tasting, because she's the one tasting the beautiful features of Krishna, whereas he's actually the source of those features. So who enjoys more? Srimati Radharani. But then Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, is he not? That's a conundrum. Therefore, he comes as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to assume the position of Srimati Radharani, although he's Krishna, to taste what Srimati Radharani is tasting. So the supreme enjoyer comes and actually is able to enjoy himself. That's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And there are other reasons why he comes. It just happens that his appearance coincides with the implementation of the Yuga Dharma. Because in every age, there's a particular religious process, a duty that everyone can perform in order to attain the highest perfection of life. And in the Kali Yuga, the Yuga Dharma is Nam Sankirtan, the congregational chanting of the holy names of the Lord. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu incidentally performed the function of spreading the Yuga Dharma because it was time for it, but his real purpose was to come and taste the mellows of love. And Rupa Goswami knew that. He wrote many verses about it. And one day when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to take his bath in the sea, and around noontime, Rupa Goswami had written this verse and he put it in the crevice of the thatched cottage in which he was staying. And when Mahaprabhu came back, he saw that palm leaf with the handwriting of Rupa Goswami, who had written the verse, and he took the verse and he looked at it. And when he saw Rupa Goswami, he gave him a mild slap, and he said, "How did you know my heart? How did you know my mind? How could you understand?" And this is the secret of bhakti, is that the clear understanding of God is there within the hearts of the pure devotees. Bhavadbhita bhagavatas tirta bhuta swayam vibho tirta kurvanti tirtani swantak stena gadabrita. Yudhishthira said to Vidura that you are a holy place personified. Some people go out of their way to go to holy places. Is it not? They do, right? Yes. So he says, but you're actually a mobile holy place, because you carry Krishna within your heart. And actually, even more importantly than carrying Krishna within their hearts, the devotees carry love for Krishna within their hearts. That is the most valuable commodity in all the three worlds, love for Krishna. It satisfies all desires. And when one comes in contact with pure devotees who carry that pure love for God within their hearts, then one can very easily advance in devotional service. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his teachings to Sanatana Goswami, begins by saying that devotional service begins in this world by coming in contact with a pure devotee of the Lord. After wandering and wandering throughout the universe, and that's what everyone's doing here, just wandering around. It may seem very urgent and important. Do you ever get any emails that are marked urgent? How does it make you feel? Pretty crummy, right? It's like, now my day's going to be ruined, maybe next week, next month, and so forth. It's not that urgent, because the real urgency in human life is to come in contact with devotional service. These other things are simply survival, which can be done anywhere. People survive on very little. They can live in the jungle, they can live in the desert, they can live simply even in the suburbs and not have to struggle so hard. The real urgency is to develop love for Krishna. So by this coming in contact after wandering from one place to another with the devotee, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says is meeting the devotee physician. The devotee acts as a physician. Carry a little black bag. We have this cliche in America. The doctor carries a little black bag with all the medicine. It used to be general practitioners come to your house in a small village. You know all the general practices of medicine and carry everything in a little black bag. So when you meet the devotee physician who carries the medicine, and two things Mahaprabhu told Sanatana Goswami that the devotee carries. He says instructions and hymns. There's mantras he'll give you. So you take these mantras and you also take this instruction. Two things. What are the two things? Instructions and hymns. That's what you need. You get good instruction, you get the hymns that go along with it. Hymns are powerful, mantras, because the world moves by mantra. Everything we do moves by a mantra. If you get the right mantras and you say the right mantras and you listen to the right mantras, you'll move in a good direction. If you get the wrong mantras, you'll keep wandering in the material world. So the mantras that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to distribute are all powerful. By chanting these mantras that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought, because he came as a devotee, although he's Krishna himself, he came as the physician, the devotee physician who's distributing these mantras. And he asked everybody else, you become a doctor. You know, right now there are some countries in Africa where there are no doctors. Can you imagine? Sometimes here we complain about healthcare, and rightly so. But think about some of these countries like Mozambique where there's no doctors. You know what they do there? What they do in these other countries, they have some program now where they're deputizing people to be doctors. I heard a program on public radio not too long ago where there was a deputy doctor. I mean, you don't want to be in this situation. You have a surgery with a deputy doctor. Where'd you go to school? I didn't. Someone just told me how to do this over the phone. And the reporter was there on the scene, and the doctor had to perform surgery. They didn't have any light because there's no electricity. So he was using the light from his Nokia phone and some improvised implement to do the cutting and so forth, to open up the person. So we should appreciate when we actually meet real physicians who have the tools. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave various living entities. In fact, he ordered that everyone become a doctor. Now, when anybody asks you, what do you do? It's just, I'm a doctor. If you're part of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. Yeah, I'm a physician. What kind of physician? Well, I have hymns and instructions. And he deputized everybody because there's a lack of doctors in this world. There's a lack of qualified spiritual physicians. But he said, everyone learn how to become a physician and go out and help people to your capacity. Go door to door and administer the medicine. Give the instructions and the hymns and help people. So this is a very important verse, the Sri Rupa Pranam. It's very deep. And if we go into the books written by Rupa Goswami, for instance, anyone who's on the path of devotional service following Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu should read the Nectar of Devotion over and over and over and over again. And listen and hear, what is the progression of devotional service? What are the details of devotional service? If we know these, we'll become more and more attracted to the process of devotional service. And there's also the Sri Upadeshamrita, the essence of all advice. That's a book you can memorize. You can keep by your bedstand, and when you wake up in the morning, you can read that instead of turning on CNN and finding out about how the world is falling to pieces. You can take advantage of these essential instructions and advance in devotional service. So Sri Chaitanya Manopishtam means that he knew the heart, he knew the mind of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Stapitam Jena Bhutale, what's established here in this material world. Swayam Rupa Kada Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam. When will I be able to properly follow in the footsteps of Srila Rupa Goswami? This is a very potent prayer that we can sing. Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Brinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Go Premanande Hari Haribo. So welcome. It's so nice to see all of you here tonight who have come to sit and hear and discuss about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is the perfection of life. You live in the perfect place, Silicon Valley. There's no place better than this on earth. And you've also come to participate in the perfect process, which is the process of Bhakti Yoga as delineated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers. So congratulations to all of you. And we'd also like to welcome everyone who's joined us on the internet tonight. This is an extraordinary opportunity we have nowadays in modern history to be connected to the spiritual sound vibration wherever we may live. Maybe in the Yukon, or in Singapore, or in UK, or anywhere in California. You can simply turn on the channel that tunes you into the vibrations that are about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the instructions of Lord Krishna. And if you listen carefully wherever you are, then you'll feel yourself uplifted. So we welcome our studio audience and everybody who's joined us from the internet. Please turn towards the camera and say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. A couple of words came into my mind today, and I wanted to just have a discussion about them because they're concepts that may help us to advance in devotional service. And the first one is momentum. Now, I did look a little bit at the scientific aspects of momentum, but they were too detailed to even comprehend without spending 8 years at Stanford to be able to appreciate them even a little bit. And if we had one of our graduate physicists here tonight, maybe we could get a synopsis of the scientific theory behind momentum. There have been, ever since Aristotle, and there have been other philosophers that have talked about what momentum is in different ways and agreed and disagreed with one another on various points. And there are various categories and subcategories of what momentum is. But nowadays, how is the word used? Besides the very scientific understandings of momentum, speed and velocity, and all kinds of technical terms, how do you use the word momentum in your life? Generally, where do you hear it and where do you talk about it? We have a bushel basket full of microphones here. So please feel free to choose anyone that you like and use the microphone so that all our participants on the internet can hear exactly what you're saying.
I just wanted to let you know that Suvilasini Mataji from Singapore is online.
Is that right?
Yeah, she just texted on WhatsApp.
How wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I was saying that we hear a lot about cultural momentum. You use the term a lot. Yeah. In the context of like when we are coming from India, we already have that cultural momentum of being
cultural momentum, yes. We hear a lot about cultural momentum. We see it a lot also. I was just in Japan, and I studied a little Japanese history just to kind of orient myself a little bit, literally. And just seeing how much culture is vital in people's lives. It's something that is extremely personal, and it does have its own momentum, doesn't it? People may do things because that's their culture, and if you ask them why they're doing it, they'll say, I have no idea. It's just the way we've always done it. And when they see somebody from another culture doing something slightly different, the way they do it, or saying it slightly different than the way they say it, you think, oh, that's crazy. Let's start a war. They're not doing it right. Cultural momentum, powerful. What other ways do you use the word momentum in your daily lives? Yes?
I have been using the term as not losing touch of something. For example, at work, if we acquire a particular skill set, then we don't want to lose the touch or the momentum for it.
Okay.
That is the usage I'm familiar with.
Not losing touch. That's nice. And cultural. Any other ways you use it? Yeah.
I probably it's like impetus. I would say, like, I would like mean it as impetus, because we say, like, when I'm with the devotees, I have the momentum to practice devotional service more sincerely. Yeah.
Nice. Impetus. Okay. Prabhuji?
What comes to my understanding with Sri Krishna's grace is movement.
Movement.
As against stagnation. So the devotion to the Lord, there is a movement and there is a momentum in it to approach the Lord's lotus feet and be one with it through devotion.
Very nice. Thank you very much. How's the temperature in here? It's hot. It's decidedly hot. What can we do about that? Anything? Okay, so let's start by asking a question. First of all, let's start by defining momentum according to the dictionary. You use the word impetus, Shamalangi. So here's the definition. The impetus and driving force gained by the development of a process or course of events. Shall I say it again? The impetus and driving force gained by the development of a process or course of events. Did you get it? Should I say it again? Yes. Okay. The impetus and driving force gained by the development of a process or course of events. You got it? Yes. Let's hear one person say it back. But try to make a mistake. Don't make us feel bad. Go ahead.
The impetus or driving force developed during the course of a process or events.
Very good. Wow, a Shrutidar. Okay. The impetus and driving force gained by the development of a process or course of events. So this is a course of events or a process. Interesting that there are various processes we come across in our lives in order to improve ourselves. For instance, in education, you might learn a language. And there's other kinds of learning. Anybody learn anything through a process? Yeah? What?
Devotion.
Devotion. You're always thinking just devotion, that's it. Mathematics and so many different things, right? Processes. And the course of events you may have experienced in your life that you think in a certain way, you act in a certain way. We talked about cultural momentum, didn't we? So, driving force. Let's see. The impetus and driving force. It means what drives us, the force that moves us forward in life. What is it that is the driving force in your life? What makes you get up in the morning and go? What is it, by the way? Huh? There's an old saying, I owe, it's off to work I go. It's from the Wizard of Oz. I owe. There's a different lyric, but It's off to work I go. It's a bumper sticker. I owe, it's off to work I go. So there may be an impetus to pay the bills, there may be an impetus to, in modern psychology, there's talk about avoiding pain and trying to find pleasure, mostly avoiding pain. Most of the things I do to get away from suffering, insulate myself from suffering in different ways. I may have, that may be my driving force, and so forth. So, and the impetus, look up the word impetus, because that's a powerful word. Shamalungi used it too. And what is our impetus? Because we are conscious living beings. We have volition, we have impetus. I'd be really interested to hear what it means.
A moving force, impulse, or stimulus.
A moving force in what?
Impulse.
Impulse or stimulus. Okay, where does it come from?
It comes from Latin, which means an attack, literally a rushing into, perhaps by haplology, by impetus, through the expected form, though the expected form will be impetitus, and somehow it's related to appetite.
Appetite. It makes you rush in and get something to eat, right? I mean, when you don't have an appetite, you don't have an impetus to eat, do you? And when you have a strong appetite.
Yeah. It's a variant stem of impetere, which means to attack.
Attack. Okay. You might attack the food. And
when I was in physics, they use the term impact, like, you take a hammer and then it's a sudden force of a short duration.
Okay.
But it's very heavy force, like a hammer.
So what's moving us forward? What's moving us forward? This word momentum comes from a Latin word which means to move. And we move because we're motivated. We have some motivation, whether it's hunger or whether it's fear of pain or searching out some pleasurable experience. I dare say, if we analyze it psychologically, we can look at a few of the main reasons why I move in this world. And there are probably very few major motivating features. Fear is something that is prevalent in this world, that I move because of fear. Look, somebody's checking in on the telephone. Who is that? Anybody on the phone? Okay. So, looking at momentum.
Hare Krishna, this is Radha Venkat from Folsom.
Radha Venkat, please go ahead. Tell us a little bit what's on your mind.
Srila Prabhupada uses the word impetus very interestingly when he's talking about Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi.
Yes?
And in that he says we are not pessimistic when we look at that, but without that there is no impetus to do something.
Without Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi, there's no impetus to do something?
No, without understanding Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi, there is no impetus to get out of that mode.
Oh, I see. If you see that we're faced with birth, death, old age, and disease, and that's the result of...
Impetus.
Then it gives you some impetus to get out of that. Is that right?
That's right.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Okay, so a few ways that the Prabhupada talks about momentum in his writings. I found two places in his letters. One is he talks about momentum in a letter to Upendra. He says, this is 1968, "My dear Upendra, please accept my blessings. I was in due receipt of your letter dated Sunday, June 23rd, 1968, and your vivid description of the pre-arrangement of Rath Yatra ceremony was so nice and elaborate that it has moved my heart. I thank you very much for grasping the momentum of Krishna consciousness by your advanced service attitude." I really like this statement. Prabhupada says, I thank you very much for grasping the momentum of Krishna consciousness by your advanced service attitude. So there is a momentum already in the process of Krishna consciousness. In other words, it's a tradition. It has already exemplars. There are exemplars in place that we can follow and so forth. And how does one connect oneself to the momentum of these great souls and of the process itself? By an advanced service attitude. One can actually come into the process of Krishna consciousness, even if one's a beginner. And if one develops an advanced service attitude, then one can take advantage of the previous teachers, of all the scriptures that are available, of the all-powerful mantra, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and so forth. So the way to gain momentum very quickly in Krishna consciousness, to move forward, is to develop a service attitude, an advanced service attitude, and think, how can I be of service? This is one of the very important methods that is foundational. It's a foundational method of moving forward in Krishna consciousness. And there's a sense in which one can actually grab on. Now, in another section of the Srimad Bhagavatam, let's talk about this for a minute, the predicament that I'm in now, in which, in the purport of 1087.36, the illusion of this world's permanence is sustained by a succession of blind men who learn the materialistic idea from their predecessors and pass on this illusion to their descendants. Anyone can see that an illusion often continues by the momentum of lingering mental impressions, even when its basis is no longer present. I'm going to read it again. The illusion, that's 1087.36, the illusion of this world's permanence is sustained by a succession of blind men who learn the materialistic idea from their predecessors and pass on this illusion to their descendants. Does that register at all? There's a way, there was in the Sri Upanishad, Anyara evahur vidyaya, anyarahur avidyaya, iti shushumatiranam, yenas tadvichakshide. There's two ways of learning in this world, the path of vidya and the path of avidya. So avidya relates to this material body. It means that it is actually not knowledge, although one is becoming more expert at taking care of the body and making arrangements in the material world, whether it's the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, which gives one a better facility in the material world. You can even go to higher planetary systems and enjoy life for a much longer duration of time with much better quality of life. That's considered avidya also, because it relates to the material world and the material body. And then there's vidya, which means the process of knowledge, which is transcendental. And Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna, Nirdvanvo Nityasatvasto, Niryoga Shema Atmavan. So don't get caught up in this avidya, because even in the Vedas, the recommendations for enjoyment in the material world are simply illusory. Let's do this. Who's ever arranging the chairs, let's please open it up so we can see our guests here, because the feng shui is not right now. We're blocking their access. So if you want, you can move up if you like, and please come closer. And if there's any gaps here, please fill them in. No one else, yeah, if you can move up to there's a seat here, move in, fill the gaps. One of the great secrets of advancing in spiritual life is to fill in the gaps. And part of it, spiritual life, is proximity. The closer you are to the spiritual vibration, the more you advance. And all you have to do is learn how to move up. Just move up closer. Sit up close. In fact, that's what Upanishad means. Upanishad means to sit up close. Upanishad, move up. Just sit up closer and listen more carefully. People who sit in the front row of classrooms get better grades. Did you know that? Try it sometime if you ever take a class. Sit up front in the classroom. You try this when you go to Stanford. You sit in there and you just look at the teacher right in the eyes and be very attentive. And you'll get an A in every class. Even if you don't do all the work. Which, anyway, you should do it. So, where were we before I interrupted myself? Vidyam. So there's spiritual knowledge, there's material knowledge, and Krishna says, don't entertain this material knowledge. It's not going to help you at all. He tells Arjuna to transcend this conception of how to make an arrangement in the material world for your safety and your well-being here. That doesn't mean to throw caution to the wind. It means you have to take care of yourself, but don't make that the goal of life. Make the goal of life to understand how to think of God at the time of death. So that's the ultimate purpose of this life, is to prepare yourself for transition. Right? Ante Narayana Smriti, when Shukadeva Goswami begins speaking in the Bhagavatam to answer Parikshit Maharaj's question, what's the ultimate goal of life? He says, to remember God at the time of death. That's a good goal to keep in mind, because it relativizes all the other kinds of difficulties we have to go through in this life when you understand that that's the purpose. So, I was speaking about this purport and says, anyone can see that an illusion often continues by the momentum of lingering mental impressions, even when its basis is no longer present. Yeah, so I can hang on to illusory activities, I can hang on to illusory thoughts by momentum, right? Does that sound familiar at all? Any kind of bad habits, illusory ways of thinking that you might have held on to at any particular time in your life or any other past lifetime that you can think of, that had no real basis in fact, but then you held on to it because, as it says here, there are lingering mental impressions, so you just went with them. After all, what is a habit anyway, except lingering mental impressions that compel us to act in certain ways? There's no good reason for it, but there's a lingering mental impression. In fact, the Yoga Sutra describes how there's a way in which we develop these vrittis, these impressions. When you have some sense gratification in this world, it stimulates a part of the brain that is a pleasure center, and then there's a psychology behind how I want to have that again. And maybe it's bad for me, right? Possibly. And then at a particular time of the day or week or month, then I go back and I say, oh, I want that again. And then you have to fight against it. And those impressions, according to Scripture, accumulate over many lifetimes. So some people are born with strong inclination towards a certain type of work, a certain type of enjoyment. And this is all by momentum in the material world. And by force of varied consciousness. The consciousness is varied, and what are the varieties? Krishna describes in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the varieties of consciousness come by mixtures of the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. And according to my association with those three modes, Purusha prakritisto hi bhunkte prakriti jan gunan karanam gunasangosya sadasad yoni janmasu. He said, these are the cause of all your different mixtures of happiness and distress, and the reason you're born in good wombs and bad wombs, and you come out one lifetime you're a pauper and next time you're a prince, to use an old cliche. But the fact is that we're moving on because that momentum is there. And what is it? It's a momentum caused by lingering mental impressions. Those are LMIs. We'll go into psychology. And when the patient comes, yes, you're suffering from LMIs. What are those? Lingering mental impressions. What do I do about it? You need a new course of thinking and acting in such a way that you can redirect your thinking process so that you don't have erroneous or harmful lingering mental impressions, LMIs, because they will literally drag you down. Literally, they will drag you down. So you don't want those lingering mental impressions that are harmful or erroneous or based on something that's not true. Because if you have that, then you'll end up in the mire of material existence. What do you think? Are you buying all this? Yes. Okay, good. So, the process of bhakti helps to realign the mind with the scripture. Scripture is apurusheya. It's beyond the human touch. It comes from a divine source. You have to accept an axiom in any science in order to move forward. And the axiom we accept is that Scripture is divine. It's perfect. It comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if you take the instruction of the Scripture as your guiding force, and actually, when you go to Scripture, it's also recommended you get an attorney who can help you go through the Scripture and find out what's most relevant in your life. That's called the guru. And then you have also examples of people who have followed in the past. That's called sadhu. So you have guru, sadhu, and shastra to guide you to develop new mental impressions and to guide your life in a certain way, so you don't simply go by momentum of erroneous impressions that you've gained from bad association. And that can take us, the momentum that we get from that takes us on a different trajectory. That trajectory can take us back home, back to Godhead. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yanti deva vrta devan pitran yanti pratirvrta bhutani yanti puteja yanti mam yajino pima. You can go wherever you like. Feel free to move about the universe, or go beyond the universe if you like even, he says. You can go wherever you direct your attention. And that's not such an easy thing. It takes a little practice, and that's the practice of bhakti yoga. To do that, we require guru, sadhu, shastra. And if you take these 3 points of direction, then you can steer yourself on the right course. Okay, momentum of lingering mental impressions. Let's take a few reflections based on that idea of the LMIs, lingering mental impressions. Something you heard that stuck in your mind, or that led you to a scriptural conclusion or something like that. Tell me what you think. Shraddha's ready to go, I can tell.
I really like the fact how the Guru, Sadhu and Shastra actually break the momentum. Otherwise you just get carried away. And Arjun also asked that question in Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, that how a person kind of does things as if being forced to do that. And then Krishna says it's lust. Because of that you do that. Yeah,
you get forced by these LMIs. Mm-hmm. And you can break that. And where are you finding that in Scripture, that you can break the LMIs and go in a different direction? Shamalangi's got an idea to continue the thought process.
Not only idea, I don't know. I mean, I already know that Prabhupada was a genius, but when you were reading all this, and I was, listening, and all these phrases which he used, again, it came to my mind. He was really a genius, even in English.
And by the way, this particular purport came from the servants of Srila Prabhupada. So not only was Prabhupada a genius, but he engendered he was able to make other people geniuses also.
Yeah.
Who followed in his footsteps. And the fact is, the parampara, those who follow the same thought process, that's passed down to them. They come to the point of accepting the authority of the scripture, of the Guru Parampara and so forth, and they follow the same thought process. They also become geniuses. So the way to become a genius, and Prabhupada used to say, in essence, I'm not a genius, I'm just following a genius. Because Krishna is the supreme genius and I'm following him. So it's not me, it's him. And this is the mood of following, to just say, I'm following the parampara. So as we've said before, that the way to outsmart a genius is to have a good plan. And the best plan is to follow the Guru Parampara. And even if you're not particularly bright, you become a genius by dint of agreeing to follow those who are beyond the modes of material nature. And you can overcome the entire material world. It becomes the size of the water contained within the hoof-prooted calf. But now, let's hear what you got.
So regarding the lingering mental impressions, so
Yes.
Recently there was an earthquake in India, and Shraddha Mataji happened to text me saying, she heard there was an earthquake in India in the eastern region, so is your family all okay? So I didn't know before that, but I went into the Indian newspapers to see, and I just saw the headlines and I realized nothing was happened to my hometown. And then I went to somehow my eyes went to the movies news section, Bollywood, and I started reading, somebody got divorced, all these, and then suddenly it came to my mind that Mahaprabhu used to say Gramya Katha, so I again stopped it. But if I go and those things still attract me, if I happen to go on those kinds of websites, so it just came to my mind.
Yeah, Gramya Katha is kind of interesting in a sense. It's like what happened to who and what, but it doesn't have much consequence at all in our life as far as directing us in a positive way. And I like your point about the fact that there are lingering impressions that attract me to certain kinds of katha in this world also. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Kapiladev talks about devotional service and the various stages of advancement. And when it comes to the perfectional stage of devotional service, he says when one's mind becomes inexplicably attracted to hearing Krishna Katha, or irresistibly, I should say, attracted to hearing Krishna Katha, this is the stage of advancement in devotional service. And I can tell if I'm not interested in certain topics that relate to the material world, but I am interested in hearing Krishna Katha, then I can judge my own advancement. We had this formula before from Jiva Goswami that one's level of interest in Krishna Katha directly equals one's advancement in devotional service. That's how you can judge for yourself how much you're advancing. And other points about LMIs or any of the lingering mental impressions, yes. And there's
I have
something
a question
online.
regarding the Grammakatha Mataji was mentioning. Actually, recently in my country, there are a lot of things happening. Like there are a lot of intolerance against the people who have different life philosophy, thoughts, and they are sometimes hacked to death. They are, indiscriminately being killed in our country. So all the things we see in the social media right now is now centered upon those matters. So even though it's out of my circle of influence, but I get disturbed. I think a lot about that, how I can help them or what should I do, especially like in the temple, the priests are killed, sannyasis are killed, what we can do. But I know that, I cannot do much about that, but I feel like I'm disturbed by that and I'm getting, I'm putting much attention to those things. So how can I help myself in this regard?
Well, one thing is chant one chapter of Bhagavad Gita every day, and the other is chant really good rounds, and the other is to read from the Bhagavatam every day without fail. And the other is to consider carefully when we're taking in information, when you're taking in information, the very things that you're talking about now. First of all, I was in Japan recently and I got a lot of emails saying, were you okay in the earthquake? And the earthquake was hundreds of miles from where we were. Didn't even feel it, didn't think about it. I saw it in the news as much as everybody else. But when it comes out the other side, it concentrated images of people dying in the earthquake and everything. It becomes augmented. And the way in which we take in information through the media nowadays tends to exacerbate this anxiety that we have about the material world, because it comes in such a concentrated form. I've found, this is just a personal practice, but not looking so much at the world news, don't go to CNN, don't go to this one, don't go there. And you don't really lose, because the items that are newsworthy that you need to hear about, and I use that word like with caution, need to hear about, they rise to a certain threshold, and you'll hear about them anyway, and most of the stuff is just below that threshold, and you really don't need to hear about it. It'll all come out to you sometime later. You'll hear about it at the grocery store or something like that, something that's really above that threshold that really makes a difference in world news. Of course, there is a way in which some people look at the overall world landscape and they keep in touch with what's going on. Not to be an escapist altogether, but you can look at it, but even if you do, filter it out, be really careful and understand that there is a circle of influence that you have, and beyond that circle of influence, you'll just get in a lot of anxiety about doing this or that. And also understand that if you dedicate your consciousness to becoming aware of Krishna, then you can do immense good in the world. And if you become acutely aware of all the different anomalies of this world, then you'll just be in anxiety all the time. And you'll be like everybody else, just agitating and talking. Did you hear about that? Did you hear about this? So, yeah, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. I can't do anything about it. But let's talk about it some more. Because there's some way of relieving anxiety somehow, apparently. It doesn't really, it just agitates it more. And therefore, Narada Muni, in the talks he had with his disciple, Vyasadeva, said that anything you desire to describe that's not the form of the Lord in his service, in his Leela, disturbs the mind like a boat on the water that has no resting place, just gets blown about by the wind. So if you can discipline yourself in certain ways and feel satisfaction, you'll also see that ultimately by being Krishna conscious, you can do the greatest good to help people in different ways. And
Hare
you can,
Krishna.
yes, please go ahead. Shruti Prabhu, I can.
Hare
Krishna.
Please, my humble obeisances. All glories to Prabhupada. I just wanted to say that this discussion on lingering mental impressions is very helpful. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad. Yeah, it's a lingering mental impression. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just, I suffer so much from, and when you were discussing it and shedding some light onto it, how we even come into this body with so many lingering mental impressions and this and that. And so, I really appreciate the discussion. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Great to hear your voice.
Hare Krishna.
So there is a way in which we can remedy the lingering mental impressions. This is the optimistic, and this is the process we're involved in. You can actually change the way in which your mind contemplates what it goes to. It can be redirected to hearing about that which is actually satisfying to the soul. And therefore the Bhagavatam says, Sutta Goswami, Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktirat hoksaje ahaitukiya pratiyata yayatma surprasidati. The soul becomes satisfied by directing his or her attention towards topics of Krishna all the time. And this is the point in the beginning of the Bhagavatam. Even Vyasadeva, he's not listening to CNN. He's writing the Vedas and the Puranas. And he's still not satisfied. He's still not satisfied. And then he says, why aren't I satisfied? Why is my mind agitated? And Narada Muni said, you got to really talk about the pastimes of Krishna. That's why Prabhupada came and gave us Krishna book. He was so attentive and concerned that the world get the form of Krishna. So this is an impetus to actually give up the material world. You got to have the form of Krishna, and you have to actually have the Leela of Krishna. And Prabhupada came and he gave the Easy Journey to Other Planets. That's a great idea. When I saw that, I said, where's that book? I want to go there. It's like, okay, I'll go. And then he gave us the Bhagavatam. And he knew it was a daunting task at his age to finish the whole Bhagavatam on the schedule he was on and with the quality of health that he had left in his body. He knew it was precarious. Therefore, he summarized the whole 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. And what is the significance of that? Vikriditam vrajavadur biraham cha Vishnu shradhanvato nashunuyad atavarna yedya. The Bhagavatam is the medicine that actually cures these pernicious, lingering impressions within the mind. It clears out the heart. And it gives one an impetus to actually love Krishna and go back to Godhead by hearing about his playful activities with his friends and his lovers in the spiritual world. You have to hear about that. So he wrote the Krishna book as a summary. Not only that, he insisted that it have illustrations. Who's bold enough to say, here's what God looks like? Nobody does that. Everyone backs off and goes, God, you can't really describe him. And he's indescribable. You can't say anything about him. Then shut up. Because you're... No, but he came out according to the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the great sadhus and sages and his spiritual master. He said, yes, God is describable. And here he is. And you have to have that. And this is what Narada Muni says. If you don't have that, then your mind will become attracted to the unlimited varieties of the material world. And look at how many channels there are on television now. It's obscene. How many channels are there? 400? 500? If you put up a satellite dish to catch all the Gramya in the universe, you put it up, like, position a little closer over there. I didn't get enough Gramya. You just, like, how many channels and categories of Gramya can you get? Well, it's getting up in the hundreds, thousands. How many magazines are there? How many newspapers are there? Gramya, all of it. And agitating to the mind. So Narada Muni said, that's for the crows. The crows pick through all the garbage, wherever it is. But the swans, they stick to that beautiful landscape where they can actually drink in something aesthetically beautiful that satisfies the soul. So the remedy for these lingering mental impressions is the process of bhakti yoga. It has to be applied systematically over time in order to transfer one's mental impressions to a higher level. So in one sense, these verbs, Prabhupada used grasp. Grasp the momentum of Krishna consciousness. How do you do that? Advanced service attitude. ASA. What has he got? He's got a good ASA. He's about a 9.5 on the ASA. You have to grasp the momentum of Krishna consciousness. And here the servants of Srila Prabhupada have written about the momentum of lingering mental impressions, which is completely in line with everything Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. He says that we carry over our thought impressions from previous lives. Not just, at the end of the universe, when everything's destroyed, look in the 12th canto, 4th chapter. That describes not right now, but when you have a leisure time during work tomorrow, and you want to go through some light reading, read about the different ways the universe gets destroyed. And when your boss comes up, what are you reading? It's about how the universe gets destroyed, including this whole building and everything. It all gets burned up. There's no more water, and then the wind comes, and the fire comes, and it's all burned into nothing. All the elements get truncated back into themselves, and then it all gets absorbed back into Mahavishnu. The soul, of course, is never affected, but the subtle impressions from the previous creation maintain. They linger. That's what lingering means. Please look it up. Linger. They're lingering mental impressions, LMIs. And those LMIs are so sticky, that they hold over from one creation to the next. And so the Shastra says that after the soul comes back out again, after being in susupti, dreamless sleep, for billions of years, and Mahavishnu exhales and the whole material creation starts again, guess what? Super soul so kind, asau gunamayer bhaver bhuta sukshmendriyatmabi, so nirmiteshu nirvishto bhunkte bhuteshu tadgunan. He enters into the bodies, into the hearts of every living being who comes out in the creation, asau gunamayer bhaver, and he reminds them of what their previous desires were. Because there's free will for the soul. It says, you wanted to maintain these lingering impressions. That's why we say at one of the 10 offenses that everyone just sort of glosses over when we say in the morning, let's say this and get on with it. But one of the offenses to the holy name is to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions to the matter. That means keeping the LMIs hanging around. Letting those impressions linger. And that's what keeps me in the material world, so don't let them linger. What does lingering mean, by the way?
To remain or stay on in a place longer than is usual or expected, as if reluctance
Ha! Just see. Read it again, that's too nice.
to remain or stay on in a place longer than is usual or expected.
Longer than usual or expected. And that's one of the points. Krishna is giving us freedom. He's saying, freedom through knowledge. He's saying, you're not expected to stay here in the material world. Everyone else says you are. Because if you make a decision to take up devotional service in a little bit more advanced level, a lot of people will tell you, nah, not so fast. No, you can't do that. Don't give up. Don't go. Even Raghunath Das Goswami, he came from a family of devotees, and they said, come on. I mean, devotional service, nice, but not, this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Come on, slow down, And he said, no, I'm going for everything, the whole thing, all the way. No more lingering. So tell us more, please.
There's one more interesting. There are 5 or 6, but the first was the best, and there's one more. It says to remain alive, continue or persist, although gradually dying, ceasing, disappearing, etc. Says a lot about our life.
A lot about lingering. And what is the root word?
Root word is very interesting. The origin is it was used in 1250 to 1300. Middle English, lengerin, which means to dwell or remain somewhere. And Old English, lengan, to delay, prolong, literally lengthen.
Huh.
So it comes from lengthen.
Huh. Very interesting. Vishakalila, do you have a microphone back there? Just sit calmly, it'll come to you by carrier pigeon. Here it comes.
Prabhu,
we can use that one too. Put it in the middle. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So you were saying that the past impressions actually travels with us as the soul travels from one body to another, and we believe that chanting clears these mental impressions and actually makes us more Krishna conscious, aware of Krishna. So is there anything else that we should be doing consciously other than just chanting to try to not dwell on the impressions, or rather try to move away from the impressions?
It's not so much that you can just give up dwelling on these impressions, because they're very sticky, as I said. But it's more that we transfer our attention to Krishna. Yukta Vairagya, we use everything in Krishna's service. And even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, you have lingering impressions from your last life that will compel you to work in a certain way. Some people are very heroic, some people are very cerebral, some people just want to make money, other people just want to serve and have a master to serve. These are the result of lingering impressions from our past life. So Krishna says, you work with that. You work with that and dedicate it to the Supreme. And if you dovetail that that propensity that you have with Krishna, then it'll become purified. Your work will become purified. And all the things that you want in life are not completely restricted. They just means you have to connect them to Krishna. We don't try to hold it back, but we try to rather engage it in Krishna's service. Yat karoshi adashnasi, yat johosi dadasi, yat tapasasi kontiyat, tat kurushva manarpadam. Whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, whatever austerities you perform, Krishna says, do it for me. Center it around me. And in bhakti, there's a way in which we're connecting to sensual activities, apparently sensual activities. They are sensual activities because we're sentient beings. We do have senses. You can't deny the senses. They'll come back and bite you. You have to engage them in something superior. And so we have socializing. But how do you socialize? You socialize with devotees and talk about Krishna. You do service for Krishna. How do you eat? You eat sumptuously, but offer it first to Krishna. And how do you work? Work for Krishna. And there is a way to connect to activities that are related to Krishna. And there's nothing so sensually opulent as devotional service. I had this visceral experience when I went down to the Dallas temple a year or two ago, and I just been flying through airports. I mean, airports are sterile places, aren't they? Delhi airport, what are they thinking? It's all duty-free. What's duty-free? Whiskey and perfume and cigarettes. Anything else? Maybe a chocolate. I mean, come on, give me a break. A way to kill the soul? Here, have some whiskey, perfume, cigarettes, and chocolate, and be happy. And all the photography they use is some, it's 99% women in very enticing situations. That'll agitate the mind also, because women don't even look like that in the pictures. And it's just such an artificial environment. And how did I get off on this? That the material world, it's very sterile. Especially nowadays, Kali Yuga, every place you go, there's a very paltry offering to the senses. It's not very nice. And, some people who are a little bit more refined, Prabhupada says, who are a little more in the mode of goodness, they go to museums, they go to see art. There's a little bit of satisfaction from that. If you go to a museum and you spend a little time looking at fine art, look at the great masters painting and things like that, then you feel a little satisfaction, but it's not enough. You actually have to have spiritual sense gratification, and that's what bhakti is. And so I had this experience going through the different airports, flying also. I mean, that's the worst mode of travel in the world. You just crammed in a little cockpit, no air. They bring you a little snack and throw it at your face, and have some bubbly sugar water and feel better. I mean, it's horrible. And you can't see anything, and you got to sit next to people. This guy's got to get up, use the restroom. I mean, it's horrible. The only thing you can say about flying that's good is you got there without crashing. Because you can't see anything. You go by train, at least you can look out, and you're like, I would go by train in Japan, and you can look out and go, well, there's people and trees and this and that. The soul needs that. Terra firma. You got to put you got to connect to the variety, to the aesthetic beauty of the world. You don't get that in flying. So I flew, I saw the duty free, nothing there for the little soul, nothing in the air. Get down and you start to feel morose. Like, God, I feel enervated. All my energy sucked out. And then I walked in the temple room, sat down, and they made such an opulent temple there. Shri Shri Radhakala Chandji, he's the supreme enjoyer. He's standing up there enjoying all these cooked offerings, the most beautiful flowers that are available in Texas. He's wearing them around his neck. He's playing a flute, hanging out with his girlfriend. All the walls are replete with pictures of the spiritual world where all they're doing all day is playing, no work. You don't have to go to work ever. And, it's just, I sat in there and my senses felt overwhelmed, but in a good way. In a good way. And you have to have that. You have to feel overwhelmed. You have to come and see an Abhishek where Krishna is getting bathed, and you don't know why you're suddenly feeling so happy and elated, but it's connected to this spiritual sense gratification. So it's not about denying the senses, but it's about entering into the world of real sense gratification. And it takes a little practice, because the senses want to crawl back to their original, not their original, but the artificial gratification that they're used to. It's this habitual way of trying to enjoy dead matter, which is a kind of insanity. But with the restorative process of taking in knowledge from the scripture and actually practicing with one's senses, this spiritual sense gratification, in association with other devotees, one can recover. Just as much as one who is addicted to drinking alcohol, which is the most asinine of all activities. Drinking a liquid that you can light with a match. It's crazy. Or smoking cigarettes, which is equally as crazy. Why? There's air to breathe. I mean, I can't wait to get outside and breathe the air. And then sometimes I come up from the subway in Japan. We're going in the streets to distribute books, and there's like all these stairs going up. And where's some air? And I come up and somebody's smoking a cigarette at the top of the stairs. And I get secondhand smoke, and I think, why would you breathe that into your lungs? And it's an addiction. It's irrational. But one can become sane again by listening to the scripture, by associating with devotees, and by practicing real sense gratification. We can get on the right track again. Other? Yes.
When I was thinking of this lingering mental
Hold that right against your chin.
When I was thinking about this lingering mental impressions, I remembered one in the Nectarian Ocean of the Holy Name by Sachinandan Swami Maharaj. He writes there that how, like when a truck, when it goes over a particular path again and again and again and again, so it creates a sort of impression. And that impression, that's what we have actually for many lifetimes. And when we have to practice Krishna consciousness, it's like making a other route for it actually to go across. It may be hard, but it is not
That's
impossible.
literally very true too, according to modern studies of the brain, that there are actual neural pathways that are developed when one performs a particular activity over and over again. Even in learning, if you learn a new language, your brain grows in a particular direction. There are tracks and the good news is that if you practice developing good impressions, you'll develop that kind of propensity to do them more and more. And if you avoid doing the things that are harmful, then they eventually shrink as well. The Yoga Sutras talk about that as well. Okay, so there's one other concept that I want to talk about. First of all, just finish off this summary discussion of momentum. I'll just also mention this other concept. That is that this metaphor Prabhupada uses of our karma being like momentum, and he says it's a fan, and you pull out the plug as you change your intention. I'm not going to stay in the material world, but I'm going to go back to Godhead. But the fan, even when you pull the plug out, it spins for a while more. So Prabhupada writes that to the devotee, such adverse condition is seen as the benediction of the Lord, and more enthusiastically he engages himself in the Lord's transcendental service. He is never hampered by such reaction. Neither his Krishna consciousness is hampered by the least degree. In the presence of such adverse conditions of karmic reaction, the Lord advises to tolerate. Tamstatikshashva Bharata. My dear Arjuna, please tolerate these things without being perplexed. They come and go like seasonal changes of summer and winter. They have nothing to do with the pure soul engaged in devotional service. So the reaction is stopped, but the momentum is there. Simply one has to tolerate. So this is one of the great remedies for stopping the momentum of lingering impressions, and that is toleration. It's a great weapon, because if you don't react, then you don't continue the momentum. Non-reaction. Just let it spin. And not only does the devotee let it spin, but he or she observes that this I created by previous engagements with the modes of material nature, and now it's spinning itself out. And it's the mercy of Krishna to allow me to experience it so that I won't do it again. And I simply tolerate whatever's coming now, and I let it spin out. In fact, the devotee is happy to see it come, because that's my material life spinning away, spinning down, and he won't contribute to the momentum of it anymore. So a good question to ask oneself is, where is my current momentum taking me? Where is your current momentum taking you? And here's some other good news, practical tips, that there are ways to build momentum in your life. Very practical principles. One is, first, make a commitment to taking the necessary action steps that you need to change your momentum. Study the science and find out what steps you have to take to change the momentum in your life. And in the early stages of the practice, action needs to be your main concern. You don't have to think about the ultimate goal, otherwise you may become overwhelmed, as the ultimate goal may be far away. But you can, by simple steps, and that's number 2, break the process down into baby steps. And if you take small, consistent steps toward a goal, it's generally more effective than trying to take large, sporadic actions. And this is something that is there's a whole science of mini habits and taking very small. In Japan, there's a concept called Kaizen, which means you take the tiniest little step forward in any discipline to get started, and keep taking tiny little steps forward, because they lead to momentum. And don't get overwhelmed by trying to capture the whole thing at once or change everything. I mean, turning around our material life requires a little bit of momentum, and you do that through baby steps. Don't shift your focus toward the results too early. Don't look for results right away. Because like what people say all the time, I've been chanting for 10 years, how come I'm not crying in ecstasy? Right now you're just trying to change your momentum. Just keep chanting. Think about momentum changers, don't think about the result so much, but understand the science of momentum, that everything in the universe works like this. On the material plane, spiritual plane, if you take your intention and you direct it in a certain way and you move in that direction, even if it's baby steps, Krishna says, swalpam apyasya dharmasya, even if it's tiny, he said that's significant, especially on the spiritual platform. If you take tiny steps towards your goal, towards doing the right thing, even if it's the smallest thing. And I notice this in my daily practice. There's ways in which the modes shift throughout the day. And it's a constant battle to stay in the realm of Krishna consciousness, so you have to win little battles throughout the day. And if it's the tiniest little thing where I win over the mind, I say, mind says, you do this, and I say, I'm going to do that instead. And I win that tiny little battle. Suddenly I feel spiritual integrity, I get some momentum. And if I can get 3 of those strung together in one day, boy, what a good day, huh? What a good day if I can hear 3 mantras in my 16 rounds and I can actually apply myself in that way. So try to go for the tiny little victories and don't look at the result, just look at the momentum you're building, because it's always there. Have faith in the momentum. And use momentum to overcome procrastination, because procrastination is the enemy is the way I keep putting it off because it looks too big. So break it down into the smallest little steps and try to develop momentum rather than win the whole game all at once. Do something every day to move towards your goal. Okay, there's a second concept in the last few minutes that I want to talk about, which is capacity. Capacity. So what is capacity? Capacity, the maximum amount that something can contain. The amount that something can produce. The ability or power to do, experience, or understand something. I'm going to stick with this one for a minute. Listen to it again. Capacity. Everyone say capacity. Capacity. Okay, when you walk out of here and somebody grabs you by the arm and says, what does that guy talk about there? You'll say? Capacity. Yeah, capacity. And here's what it means. The ability or power to do, experience, or understand something. So what is that? The ability or power to do, experience, or understand something. Do, experience, understand, right? The power of or ability to do that. So in the Gita, what is it? 5th chapter, Krishna says that Shaknoti haivaya shodhum praksharira vimokshanat kama krodot vavam begam sayukta sa sukhi naraha. He says you have to have a certain kind of Shakti. Shaknoti haivaya shodhum praksharir vimokshanat. You have to develop it. Or he says, one who is able to develop this power or capacity to withstand the forces of desire and anger, the material senses, tolerate the power to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, is well situated and becomes sukhinara, happy human. So, what is our capacity? It's our ability or power to do, experience, or understand something. It comes from Latin. That means to take hold, or something that can contain something else. So what is our capacity to take in Krishna consciousness? What is our ability to practice Krishna consciousness, and so forth? So, in the Bhagavad Gita, there's interesting things said about capacity. Prabhupada writes in, for instance, his purport to 13.1 Bhagavad Gita, and so, according to his capacity to dominate material nature, he gets a field of activity. He is referring to the soul. That field of activity is the body, and what is the body? The body is made of senses. The conditioned soul wants to enjoy sense gratification, and according to his capacity to enjoy sense gratification, he is offered a body, or field of activity. Therefore, the body is called kshetra, or the field of activity for the conditioned soul. Then 13.3 says, purport, there are different kinds of bodies, and there are different owners of the bodies, because each individual soul has his individual capacity for lording it over material nature. There are different bodies, but the Supreme also is present in them as controller. So we're provided with varieties of capacity to enjoy the material world or lord it over the material world according to our previous impetus to do so. And what is it? It's a reward by material nature. You want it? Here you go. It's all offered to us. Shariram yaravapnoti yachap yukramatishvara grihit vaitani samyati vayur gandam ivashir. Shotru, I'm sorry. What? Can you say it louder? Shotram chakshu sparshanam cha rasanam grahanam evacha adishtayam manaschayam vishayan upasevate. So we're custom built. Material nature is so accurate. There's no mistake. It's not random. It's given to us according to our previous impression and the way we've worked in this material world and what we've asked for. And we're given a particular set of what do we get? A nose? What kind of nose you got? I mean, pigs got a nose that can smell all kind of crazy stuff, and they keep it to the ground all day long. And a dog, I mean, they could smell 400 times more than we can. It's like somebody, I really want to smell a lot in this material world. So you get a dog nose. Or eyes from the vulture. The vulture can see from miles up there. How'd you see that? It's like, I don't know. Somebody gave me these eyes as a reward. I was awarded these eyes because I wanted to see dead bodies. So I can see them from 2 miles up. And so the senses are, and the kshetra, the body, is an award by the material nature according to our desire. The soul requests, and the material nature responds by the direction of the super soul. Asau gunamayer bharaver bhuta sukshmendriya mimbi swam nirmiteshu nirvishto bhunkte bhuteshu tad gunan. We should take a look at that verse. I keep saying it. Let's see what it means. Please bring us to 1st canto, 2nd chapter, text number 31 or 2. That's a guess. He's fast. Who's in the booth tonight? Oh, no wonder. There's some brainy person back there. Okay, that's not it. Let's try 32, eh? I haven't memorized the number of the verse. That's not it either. Let's try one more, and if not, we'll go backwards. 33, is that it? Yeah, 34 is the last one. There it is. Now we know. From now on, we know it's 1, 2, 33. Everyone please say that. 1, 2, 33. Okay, so asau, that Paramatma, guna, mayi, influenced by the modes of nature, bhavai, naturally, bhuta, created, sukshma, subtle, remember that. Because these impressions that we're getting are very subtle, right? Subtle desires, that's what creates everything. It starts from a seed form. Indriya, senses, atmabi, the living beings, swa, nirmiteshu, in his own creation, nirvishta, entering, bhunkte, causes to enjoy. Remember that one. Causes to enjoy, bhunkte. Bhuteshu, in the living entities. Tad gunan, those modes of nature. Translation, please. The supersoul enters into the bodies of the created beings who are influenced by the modes of material nature and causes them to enjoy the effects of these modes by the subtle mind. Right? Yeah, that's the verse. So, what's going on here? You want to see the purport. Okay. There are 8,400,000 species of living beings, beginning from the highest intellectual being, Brahma, down to the insignificant ant, and all of them are enjoying the material world according to the desires of the subtle mind and gross material body. The gross material body is based on the conditions of the subtle mind, and the senses are created according to the desire of the living being. The Lord as Paramatma helps the living being to get material happiness because the living being is helpless in all respects in obtaining what he desires. He proposes and the Lord disposes. In another sense, the living beings are part and parcels of the Lord. They are therefore one with the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, the living beings in all varieties of bodies have been claimed by the Lord as his sons. The sufferings and enjoyments of the sons are indirectly the sufferings and enjoyments of the Father. Still, the Father is not in any way affected directly by the suffering and enjoyment of the sons. He is so kind that he constantly remains with the living being as Paramatma and always tries to convert the living being toward real happiness. Okay, so capacity, it's our ability to, again, back to the definition of capacity, the ability or power to do, experience, or understand something. So we practice devotional service to increase our capacity to perform devotional service. You have to practice to increase your capacity, your ability to do it. And the more you practice, the more you'll increase your ability and the power to do it. It's like sometimes people start off chanting rounds and they say, I can only chant one round. It doesn't matter how hard I try, I can just do one round. And they keep trying and they take the proper help, guidance, they keep hearing from others about Krishna and the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. They go, I'm doing 6 rounds now. And I could never get to 16. And then 2 months later, I'm doing 16. How did you do that? Or 2 years later, whatever it may be. Everyone has a different capacity and speed. It's okay. Take your time. It's not a huge race. It's just a matter of your own personal development. But when you get there, how are you doing it? How did you increase the capacity? And that's a great science of how to increase the capacity. Those who increase their capacity for Krishna consciousness become celebrated because they're connected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's the all-glorious, all-powerful, all-magnificent person. And they have a capacity for hearing. They have a capacity for chanting. They have a capacity for service. When you meet somebody who has a capacity for service, it's a wonder to behold. They just have a spontaneous desire and ability and power to serve. And this is what the Shastras celebrate. They say somebody who's developed this. And it doesn't happen by accident. It happens by the mercy of Krishna and by the application of the principles of momentum we talked about to develop that capacity. So, one interesting thing about capacity, in Bhagavad Gita 14.3, Krishna says, when there is an increase in the mode of ignorance, O son of Kuru, darkness, inertia, madness, and illusion are manifested. Purport, when there is no illumination, knowledge is absent. One in the mode of ignorance does not work by a regulative principle. He wants to act whimsically, and whimsically for no purpose. Even though he has the capacity to work, he makes no endeavor. This is called illusion. Although consciousness is going on, life is inactive. These are the symptoms of one in the mode of ignorance. So the point is, we have, as parts and parcels of Krishna, we have an unusual capacity because we're conscious living beings. It's actually amazing, the capacity that we have. It's beyond the mind's ability to understand how wonderful it is. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, as charyavat paschchi kashidenam. You can look at the soul and you won't be able to fathom how wonderful it is, how astonishing it is. But when the soul becomes attached to matter, his capacity becomes diminished. How much so? By the mode of ignorance, even he has capacity, he can't move, can't do it. He has a duty to perform, but he can't do it anyway. There's good things to do, but he can't do them. There's good things to eat, he can't eat them. He eats the bad things, dictated by the mode of ignorance. And capacity to perform devotional service, practically nil. Actually nil. Nothing. Nothing comes out. This is how low the capacity can go. You can run it down past E into that little point where there's nothing left. So we have to go the other way. We can't fall into that abominable mode of ignorance. We have to raise our capacity for devotional service. Srila Prabhupada writes in 1944 about the spiritual world. He says, in these spiritual planets, the Supreme Lord as Narayan predominates, and the healthy, unconditioned living beings live there by rendering loving service to the Lord in the capacity of servant, friend, parents, and fiancé. There, the unconditioned living being begins to enjoy life in full freedom with the Lord, whereas the impersonalist Gyanis and Yogis enter to the impersonal glowing effulgence of the Vaikuntha planet. So as I began tonight's class, very early on, before some of you were here, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought the process, the practice through which one could reach one's highest capacity as a soul. And that is to serve Krishna in various very personal relationships, as a friend, as a parent, as a lover, as a servant, and so forth. One can actually develop that capacity through the process given by Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada. And then finally, in 434, Prabhupada writes, and this is something I quote frequently, incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everyone okay? Keep going? Appear in all the species of life. Although this is inconceivable to the human brain, the Lord's pastimes are differentiated according to the appreciating capacity of the different types of bodies of the living entities. The Supreme Lord bestows the most merciful benediction upon human society when He appears in His human form. It is then that humanity gets the opportunity to engage in different kinds of eternal service to the Lord. Special natural appreciation of the descriptions of a particular pastime of Godhead indicates the constitutional position of a living entity. Adoration, servitorship, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love are the 5 primary relationships with Krishna. The highest perfectional stage of the conjugal relationship, enriched by many sentiments, gives the maximum relishable mellow to the devotee. So here is the purport I so much like about appreciating capacity. Different animals have dictated to them by the modes of material nature, because of the momentum of their past varied consciousness and association with the modes of material nature, a certain capacity to understand and appreciate and enter into the relationship with the Lord. When one comes to the human form of life, one has the capacity to enter fully into that level of understanding. Labvam sudulabam bidam bahusam bhavante. The Bhagavatam says that it's very rare to get this vessel, this human body, and from this position, one is meant to understand one's relationship with Krishna. And to the degree that we practice the principles of devotional service and apply ourselves and get the mercy of the Lord, we can develop our capacity for understanding and appreciating Him and His devotees. How is that done? Especially by association and especially by hearing. And also applying the principle of tolerance, as I mentioned before. Tolerance is our great weapon. As Krishna says in the Gita, 15th chapter, when He describes our entanglement in the material world, asanga shastrena dridhena chitva, He says, how do you cut down the momentum that we've gained in the material world? He says by detachment. You could also say by tolerance. This is a kind of practice detachment. Just tolerate and let it go by and don't grab onto the wheel. Just let it fly. Manjulakanta.
Maharaj, Hare Krishna Maharaj, the line you just read that says that the Lord comes in different forms, in different species. He has His pastimes in different species, and this is something that is difficult for people to understand. I just wanted a clearer understanding of that sentence. Does it mean that at some point the Lord is having pastimes with ants? He's an ant too?
Difficult to understand.
I don't understand that at all.
That's why it says it's difficult to understand.
Okay.
He's all merciful, so he goes everywhere. And yes, it means that.
So the appreciating capacity of each species is different. Does that mean that there may be even sadhus in the form of ants, in the form of deer, that there is a capacity for that?
Yeah, I mean, the Lord's always with us. He's in the heart of every living entity. To begin with, He never leaves us. And we're not separated from Him by distance, only by consciousness. And in various ways, He makes Himself available through prasadam, through the Ganges, through the Bhagavad Gita, through sadhus, And he does, as the Shastra says here, he comes in various species of life to attract the living entities. So we just take it as a general principle that he's got a full court press going on here in the material world. It's just like, here I am, you know, and everyone's like, I didn't see him, did you? Nah. So those who turn their attention to him very easily, you know, can appreciate that he's right there all the time. Okay, yes, a text came in.
I just wanted to make a comment that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also talked about language of the vegetables, so Lord could be incarnating there as well. Who knows?
Yeah, the vegetable tribes. He said we have to preach even amongst the vegetable tribes. So the Vaishnav, even more merciful than Krishna, is thinking like how to deliver the vegetables. It's really deep compassion. Yes?
So there are 3 text messages.
3 texts, yes.
One is from Suvalasi Madhvi Mataji from
Who?
Singapore.
Oh, yes.
And she's actually making an observation that sometimes the mind gets attracted towards doing something good or bad for no reason. And then she says, but there is a reason, that's the LMI.
That's right. LMI.
And
I'm taking the day off today. I need a sick leave. What's the matter? I got LMI. Oh, okay, go ahead.
and Rasprada Prabhu.
Rasaprada.
Yeah.
Oh.
He mentioned that he was talking about momentum substitution. And
Momentum substitution, nice.
so he came
It's going
running.
in our textbook.
He came running from his office to come and get involved in this momentum that we have here at ISV and thereby get out of the other momentum that is to make more money by staying back more at work.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, if you go to a class and you hear about Krishna, you get a certain momentum, even when you're going away. You know, others can feel it too. Like if you go to a seminar or like a retreat for 3 days, 4 days, they even tell you at the end, you don't realize how much momentum you have. Be careful when you go home. Don't go back and start converting everybody because they don't have the kind of momentum you do. You got to be careful about it. You can see the difference in your overall mindset and everything just by association. It really does build up. So Rasaprada, as usual, makes a good point. What else?
And then we have Damodar, Dhameshwar Mahaprabhu.
Dhameshwar Mahaprabhu. Wow, it's a banner night here, I must say.
So he actually texted me on Facebook, and
Okay.
I asked him to text on WhatsApp, and he said, I don't know what is WhatsApp. And I said, you are good.
He doesn't know what's WhatsApp. Well, if he doesn't know what's Facebook, then he's good. WhatsApp, that's
So there were 2 comments that he made.
Okay.
One was he says that about the LMIs originally, when at the beginning of the class, he was quoting that Jesus also said something similar. Do not conform to worldly ways. Transform yourself, renew your mind. Discern the will of God, all good, acceptable, and perfect, true.
very nice. Please send me the quote, Dhameshwar Prabhu. I'll use it.
On WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And then he has a question for you. That what is the difference between neglecting material desires and the tamasic tendency to deny that one has a problem or that it requires to be addressed? You say to neglect material desires. I don't understand this because my experience is that without proactively counteracting the momentum of my LMIs, they continue and grow despite my full engagement in devotional service. It's like the analogy whereby Shravanadi Jal, where by Shravanadi Jal, the weeds of material desires are watered too. So how can they be eliminated by neglect if they are strong? Unless this only means passing desires which come from perception and not LMIs. If I see an ice cream shop, I may want to go and eat, but forget when no longer exposed. But if I go every day, it becomes an LMI. It seems to me that neglect is not for LMIs.
it's a matter of semantics, I think, because you would have to define the levels, and I agree that there are levels of compulsion that develop according to one's particular mixture of modes of material nature and how deeply one's involved. And there is such a thing as passing material desires that are simply urges that one can overcome more easily, and there may be addictions, and addictions require a much more concentrated effort and a step-by-step process to overcome. A lot more help is required. So these are general principles. The principle of neglect, I like to say tender, loving neglect. In other words, what's the difference? You understand and admit the problem, and therefore you're aware of the fact that you have something to work on, and you can discuss it with yourself and others who are your well-wishers openly, and then make a strategy to overcome it. And in the context of that, you can apply the principles of neglect, or also we can call tolerance, at certain levels. But it also requires fortification through good association, through replacing those with other habits, those bad habits with good habits. And it can also require supporting education. And there are organizations that have very carefully looked at the psychological ways in which one needs help. I've mentioned this many times because I investigated this one fast-growing enterprise in America when I was looking at some businesses and things. One of them was Weight Watchers. And I saw their techniques eating it can become an addiction. It's not eating to live, but it's living to eat. And one can just resort to eating because one feels better about oneself, sort of to comfort oneself and so forth. One can easily overeat, especially in our society. There's a lot of things available. And they have a system through which one measures how much one eats. Not only that, but every time that the people come into their organization, they get a very thorough education about what eating is and about what different kinds of nutrition are from every different angle. So in our process, similarly, we have to have this sambandha gyan going on regularly. And you notice it helps when you have that kind of objective knowledge coming in on a regular basis, as well as the practice through which you divert your desires towards a higher principle rather than simply giving in to them and letting them run wild. And it takes a little time, and it also takes mercy. One has to pray also. Altogether possible. Otherwise, the Shastra wouldn't recommend that we do it, because it doesn't recommend things that aren't possible. Okay, so we have about 2 more minutes left. Quick comment.
Thank you so much. Very beautiful points you mentioned. Would you be able to elaborate on ASA, Advanced Service Attitude?
Advanced Service Attitude. Yeah, we've talked about that in other classes when we talked about attitude, because I had a class called the 3 Secrets. 3 Secrets of something. Oh, how to develop 3 secrets to develop an uncommonly powerful spiritual practice, even in Silicon Valley, or wherever I am. That's even in Colorado, Denver, or whatever, New York. And the first one is attitude, and this service attitude is a very powerful realignment of the attitude. It's changing the way I look at the world, and it can be done. It can be done because we're naturally servants. And if I simply change my attitude towards becoming a servant, even if you start, you don't even know you're serving the Supreme, even if you start by having a service attitude towards humanity. In fact, in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about, think of me always. If you can't do that, practice thinking of me. If you can't do that, give your resources to help spread Krishna consciousness. If you can't do that, be charitable towards others. Think of yourself as serving other people. And because when you give, you grow. You start to develop a higher capacity. And developing an advanced service attitude means to take that principle of service and then refine it so you understand that serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate service. Yomam evam asammudho janati purushottamam. So sarvavid bhajatimam sarva bhavina bharata. This is the best kind of service. One who knows that this is the best service. And that actually by serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you serve all living entities because you're watering the root of the tree. It's the best service to everybody. Then you come to this point of ASA, advanced service attitude. And you can do it rather quickly as a neophyte if you're able to catch this principle of following the acharya, following the authority. And just admit, I don't know anything, but I do know enough to understand that there is an ultimate source of divine knowledge and it's coming through a channel. And if I simply follow the instructions coming through that channel, then I'll have perfection in life. Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. Thank you to everyone who joined us here in the studio tonight. And for all of those on the internet, everyone say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thanks for getting us all together tonight, and for all of those who worked hard to make this facility possible so we could keep the vibration going. And now, speaking of keeping the vibration going, we're going to have an Artik ceremony, which is just outrageous. We're going to stand up and dance, which practically nobody does in Silicon Valley anymore, and we're going to sing. So we'll put all the chairs and asanas away, and everyone please feel free to stay for the Artik. Hare Krishna.
Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman, hey, Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman.